Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you that you cannot logically explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A number of synchronicities or meaningful coincidences. Here's one really weird example. Once, when driving home from work, I decided to pick a random 2-digit number and count how many times I see it in license plates of other cars, just for fun. I picked the number 86. I then saw 2 cars in a row with 86s. I thought this was a pretty rare occurrence. The next morning, while driving to work, I saw a car with 8686. When I got to work, I saw a woman in a building with a shirt that had a large 86 on it. Amazed, I decided to look up the number 86 on a break to see if it had special significance. Turned out, 86 means nix or stop. This was really the first time I even learned of the word nix, and I'll be darned if I didn't see a license plate saying nix on the way home that day. When I was 20, I saw an iridologist whose cure for every problem were several bottles of mysterious herbs and supplements from his shelves. Looking into my irises, he somehow managed to identify several injuries I had, including a healed knee injury from martial arts, and that I had scraped my arm this morning. I was wearing a sweater that I wasn't wearing when I scraped my arm, so he couldn't see it, and it didn't really hurt, so it's not like I was babying it. Same with the knee. It healed, and there was no sign of it in my gait. He wasn't cold reading. He didn't toss out a bunch of diagnosis and a few hit. He didn't say much, but what he did say was pretty accurate. I've looked into iridology since then, and it seems like there's no scientific proof it's a thing. Since then, I've met an acting coach who was super perceptive and regularly did the same Sherlock Holmes reads on me. So maybe he was just a super perceptive guy? I don't know. My childhood house has been passed down from generation to generation for about 100 years now. For the longest time, we knew something was going on that we couldn't see but felt it. When I was about 11 years old, my grandmother passed away. About 6 months later, while our family was eating dinner, everyone at the dinner table heard my grandmother's voice upstairs. We checked the entire house, empty except for us. We have no logical explanation for what we heard. Twice we've lost a dog in our house. The first time it happened, we watched her go upstairs, but she never came back down. We really didn't think nothing of it, but then we all started to realize that we haven't seen her for a while, so we all went to go look. We searched the entire house, but we never found her. The second time was about the same, except she seemed to have disappeared somewhere between her food bowl and her bed. The time it happened, my brother was sitting in the room on the computer, so of course he didn't see anything. All he said was he heard her walking across the room. We never found her either. Found a creature that should not and supposedly does not exist. As a kid, I spotted a concrete blister, a small air bubble at the base of a pillar. The surface of the blister must have been very thin because I was able to smash it open with an empty plastic bottle. Inside was a bright green, 2-headed worm wriggling around. I say 2-headed, but it's like part of its body branched off at 45-degree angle, and it was shorter than the main head. Apart from its bizarre appearance, how on earth did it get there, and how did it survive? This bubble was perfectly sealed on the outside, and there were no tunnels in that concrete leading into the bubble. What was it eating, and how was it breathing in a sealed concrete bubble barely longer than its own body? This one experience is going to bother me for the rest of my life. I lived in an old apartment in downtown near Portland, Oregon. The building was built around 1920. Anyway, I had a Monday morning off work and decided to do laundry. It was a quiet morning. The thing that sucks about these old buildings is usually coin-op laundry in a basement. I gathered my bed sheets and a large blanket. I had a laundry pot on top and grabbed a few quarters. I walked down the stairs that are immediately to the right of my front door. I didn't pass anybody going up or down, just little old me going down alone to do laundry, no big deal. I get into the basement, and I put my bed sheets in the washer. Realized my large blanket wouldn't fit. It's okay. One load of sheets and one wash by itself with a blanket. I was putting in the quarters one by one and realized I was short by 1/4. Walked immediately up the stairs again, didn't pass anyone, and there's only one entrance into the basement. Grabbed a quarter in my living room, went right back downstairs, came back to the basement, and my large duvet blanket wasn't on the floor anymore in front of the washer, where I'd left it. It was folded perfectly on a folding table across the basement on the other side. This was far, not immediately next to the washer, across the entire basement. This was a heavy-ass blanket that would take enough time where I'd walk in on someone attempting to fold it, since my apartment door was right outside this basement. No one came down either. I would have passed them. After this, I learned my apartment was extremely haunted, but just seeing stuff happened, like walking shadows, etc., not actual physical objects moving around. I know 10,000% that was not normal, and I have zero way to explain it to this day. And yes, I moved. I've read my share of ghost stories and hauntings and poltergeists and all that. I gotta say, if there are ghosts or some supernatural entity, if they're doing your chores, just be grateful, right? I mean, folding a duvet cover alone is a pain in the butt, so thanks. I have a few, actually, all from when I was a kid. One time I went to sleep on a Monday and woke up Thursday. I had no recollection of the past 2 days, but according to my mother, I'd been acting normal and going to school just fine. Once I woke up to hear loud knocking on my door super clearly, but there was nobody there. The knocking was what woke me up in the first place, and it didn't seem familiar to me at all. Also, I wasn't having a dream where someone knocked on the door, so I don't know what happened. Nobody was at the front door either. I moved to a new apartment, and there was a spider on my wall. I was afraid of spiders to the point I didn't even like killing them, but this one wasn't moving and appeared to already be dead, so I named him Gerald, and he lived with me. After a month, he started moving about 2 centimeters a day. I wouldn't see him move, but he would be in a different area of his corner every day. One day I opened my bedroom door to find Gerald alive and moving, also hanging upside down, seeming to be trapped in a web or something. Since I was still scared of spiders, I ran to get my mom, and she killed Gerald with a broom. This happened relatively recently, mid-2020, and I still have no idea what it could have been. Jumped to the bottom from my mom's decent burn. I was laying down on my bed because I had a nondescript headache, like a regular stuffy pressure headache, and was going to nap for a few hours. Eventually, I started feeling like I was falling forward but not upward somehow. I sleep on my back, so it was an extra weird, confusing sensation. But it legit felt like I was suspended while leaning forward over an edge, if that makes sense. After a minute or so, I felt like I was underwater and or sleep paralysis. I couldn't move anything, but my arms and torso were slowly tensing up. I couldn't open my eyes, but I was seeing dark blue something, like those old visuals on media players when you listen to music. Anyway, while my legs were frozen and my upper body is tensing, I could feel my arms slowly lifting straight up, not toward my head, like toward the ceiling. While my forearms are lifting, my shoulders, back, abs, and pecs are all tensing, and all feel like they're pulling inward to my sternum. All the while, I'm completely awake and aware, but can't open my eyes. I have no way to confirm it, but it felt like maybe 2 or 3 minutes of this. My breathing is getting rapid, while everything is tensing, but I wasn't having a panic attack. My arms and chest started shaking, not violently, but more like a rumbling vibration. The shaking or rumbling was only for a few seconds, and then suddenly, my eyes shot open. I was trying very hard to open them this whole time, in time to see my hands or forearms in the air, fingers fully outstretched. Then in another instant, my arms dropped, my body untensed, and I could move again. Immediately after, and for the following day, I was completely exhausted and fatigued. I called my mom to tell her about it, so she or I could consult some of her doctor friends. She worked in a neurologist's office within a hospital, so easy access to docs. And I also went in to see my PCP the next day to get an EKG and EEG. Every doc said it wasn't a seizure, and the heart-brain stuff came back normal. The best answer I could get was, it's probably nothing to worry about if it doesn't happen again. And the burn I promised after all the docs came up with bupkis, I was talking to my mom about it again, and she said, maybe you were getting abducted by aliens and they gave up because they couldn't lift you. Me and my stepsister played dumb supper one time at my aunt's house while we were alone. It's like an old wives' tale game to try and discover who you'll marry. How you play is you open all the doors and windows in the house, light a candle, and cook a meal while completely silent. You set the table with the candle in the middle and 2 extra spots for the husbands. We didn't have actual candles, so we used an electric toy candle thing. According to the game, you know your husband has arrived when the candle blows out. Our electric candle went out. It definitely wasn't the batteries because it could turn back. Before we left, we made sure to close all the doors and windows, but the next day my aunt was mad at us for leaving her front door open. Not very interesting or creepy, I'll admit, but it's the best I got. When I was around 16, I had stayed at my best friend's house. Downstairs was the living room, kitchen, dining room, and a small bathroom, and upstairs was 3 bedrooms and a larger bathroom for context. I had went into the bathroom the next morning to brush my teeth. I no more brushed finish up when my mom calls us to come downstairs. I walked into her room to put my toothbrush away and noticed her sitting at her vanity brushing her hair. I don't remember verbatim what was said, but the conversation was short. I said something about her mom calling us, and she said, "Go ahead, I'll be right there." When I got downstairs to her kitchen, she was already sitting at her table. I was very confused. When I asked how she got downstairs, she said she'd been down there for at least 5 minutes. I then explained how that couldn't be possible, because I had just spoken to her in the bedroom a minute or so ago. They only have 1 set of stairs in the home, and to get into the kitchen before me, she would have had to pass me on the stairs. She did not. Preface: my daughter was about 2.5 when this happened, and her room shares a wall with my wife and I's room. One night I woke up to hear my daughter giggling and talking. It's not unusual for little kids to chat with themselves, so I initially brushed it off, but my attention was brought back to the chatter when I noticed my daughter was definitely having a conversation of some kind. She would ask a question, example, "What's your name?" and also seemed to be replying, example, "I, Susie, I like blue," etc. I listened for a minute, and after I caught on to all of this, I jumped out of bed, grabbed my bedside baseball bat, and sprinted to her room. I opened the door, and my daughter was just sitting in her crib, looking at the wall, and she turns to me with a big grin on her face. I looked around briefly, and found everything to be normal. I then asked, "Who are you talking to?" Her reply was, "Gemma," Grandma and 2 years old speak. I was then relieved, because I thought she was just playing or dreaming, as she's very close with both of her grandmothers, and I went back to bed. Next night, same chatter wakes me up. I had told my wife what had happened the previous evening, and she asked me to wake her up in the night if the conversation happened again. So I wake my wife up, and we both listen. The same question and answer giggling session is happening. My wife gets weirded out, and we both go into our daughter's room. Again, she's sitting in her crib, smiling and giggling and very much awake. My wife asks our daughter who she's talking to, and the reply is the same, "Gemma." My wife replies saying, "Grandma X and Grandma Y are at their houses sleeping," to which my daughter replies, "No, Daddy, Gemma." I then laughed and said, "Daddy's grandma isn't here anymore," because my grandmother had passed away 5 years ago at this point. My daughter then replied, "No, she's here," and pointed at the rocking chair in the corner of the room. I said, "Is she still here?" And my daughter's reply was, "No, she go." My wife and I looked at each other wide-eyed, so I went downstairs and dug a picture of my grandmother out of the drawer. I showed the picture to my daughter, and she squealed happily, pointed at the picture, and said, "That's your grandma, Dad. Your grandma likes ducks, quack quack." I was legitimately freaked out at this point. My grandmother did really like ducks. She fed a huge flock of them every winter and had a duck-themed art everywhere in her home. We also don't have any pictures of anyone in our home other than a few of our kids and a few from our wedding day, so my daughter wouldn't have seen a picture of my grandmother regularly and just been dreaming. I think I would have chalked this up to her imagination somehow, but the duck thing is what threw us for a loop. I cannot think of any reason why my 2-year-old daughter would have known that specific detail of my grandmother's life. I also adamantly do not believe in any kind of afterlife, let alone ghosts, apparitions, spirits. However, I have never been able to come up with any logical reason why this situation occurred. I'm going to make this incredibly short. I turned and drove on a road that didn't exist. I felt weird turning onto it, and as soon as I did, all electronic devices ceased function, and the gauge cluster froze up. I was driving a big rig that had electronic logs. The logging department called later that day with a question. Apparently it spit out a ton of errors. A dark, shadowy figure is what pointed me to the road. Was on it for it felt like an hour. This was on State Road 220 in North Carolina. The road looked like it was paved an hour ago, with 0 signs, and a single dotted yellow line down the center all the way through. No guardrails, and the forest came right up to the road. A few years ago, I was sitting on the couch with my little brother. I was holding my old black rubber iPod case. I accidentally dropped it on the carpet, but when I went down to pick it up, it had completely vanished. I looked everywhere for it. Under the couch, under the cushions, under me, under the carpet, but nope, it was gone. I looked for it every day, but no luck. Then a few weeks later, I found it behind one of the couch legs. I don't know how it got there, and I'm 100% sure that I checked there before. I brushed it off that my little brother kicked it, but now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure he was sitting on my knee or right beside me. Still kinda spooked. This happened to me this past Friday. I dropped my youngest son off at school and came back home. It was trash day, so I had wheeled out the bin to the end of our driveway and came back into the house, looking and locking the door behind me. I went downstairs and to the hall in my bedroom and into the bathroom to wash my hands. While I was drying them, I heard the sound of a TV come on. I frowned and wondered if my eldest son had come back from class early. It was only around 8:30 a.m., and I didn't expect him home till 10:30 a.m. I walked down the hall and realized the sound of the TV was from the one in the study. Lights were off, but you could see the flicker of the TV on the wall. I turned on the lights and walked in. The TV was definitely on. Lord of the Rings Return of the King was playing. I was stumped. When I left to drop off my son at school, we were the last ones out of the house, and the TV was definitely not on. Likewise, when I came in after dropping him off to gather up a last load of trash before stuffing it into the bin outside and wheeling it out to the street, I searched for the remote, top of the bookshelf, and was about to turn it off when the TV screen went dark. Frowning, I pressed the power button, and the TV came back on no problem. But to the menu page, not wanting to waste any more time with it, I turned the TV back off, set the remote back down on the bookshelf, and went about my business. Later that morning, when my eldest son came home, I was on the brink of mentioning the odd TV thing to him while he ate a snack and I prepared it for him, when we both heard the TV come on in the study. He was sitting at the kitchen island, and I was opposite him putting things away, and we both just froze and looked in the direction of the study. He laughed a little. "What the heck?" "Yeah," I replied. "Happened earlier today to me, too. It's glitching out, I guess." So at least I wasn't alone when it happened. I've had 2 mastoidectomies, major operations, on my left ear. Was left almost completely deaf in that ear except for a major 2-tone tinnitus. Was finally fitted with the most powerful in-ear hearing aid that the NHS offers. Worked a treat, and I loved it until my dog chewed it up just after I moved stateside. I was back to being deaf in that ear again, Move on 6 months. I'm lying in bed watching some shit on YouTube and turn on to my right side to fall asleep. This would normally cut off all noise for me. I suddenly realized that I can still hear it. This was about 6 weeks ago. Although my hearing isn't perfect, it's good enough to know which direction sound is coming from again. Having been told that I would need a hearing aid for the rest of my life, I feel like a miracle has happened. I hear things in my house. One late night, 3 a.m., I was in the kitchen and I heard a cell phone buzz, like a phone on vibrate. It sounded like it was coming from underneath the floor. I only have one cell phone in my house and it wasn't mine. My cell is in the room at the other end of the house, and even if I have music on, I can't hear it from the kitchen. I've heard a man and a woman talking, whispering loudly. I have heard noises under my house, smelled a man's cologne one day, and brutal man's body odor a few days later. Knocking on the side of my house, and I heard a man sneeze the other night, and I came home to find my kitchen window open. I don't ever open it. Ever. I went into my bathroom and found a dark pubic hair on my toilet seat, not the first time, and I don't have pubic hair. I called the cops. They said there isn't anything they can do, so just check underneath my house to see if anyone's living there. I checked, and nope, but I haven't checked my attic. I feel sick about going up there. I'll do it in the next few days. If someone is up there, they won't get far, unless they made friends with the dog when I was out. My dog is very protective, and has barked really late at night and has woken me up. By the time I get clothes on and run around the house trying to see what he's barking at, whatever it is, he's gone. Drove to Tennessee and possibly time-traveled by accident. For this story, you need an understanding of Atlanta. Skip ahead if you're good. Atlanta can be best summarized by thinking of the bypass road 285 as the border of a clock face. I lived in Sandy Springs, just outside of the 11 to 12 position. At the time, my roommate and I were working at the Georgia Renaissance Festival, well south of the 7 position, 75 to 85 coming into the clock, at the top at separate highways. Meet in the middle briefly, and split again before leaving the clock. We were coming back to the fair, intending to get on 285 to avoid traffic and go north, left, to go around the bypass to our home in the north. However, monster traffic following a major accident in that direction had other ideas. So we decided to go east, right, connect with 85, and take it north to cut through the city. If we followed 85 to where it connected with 75, we could take it to 285 and get back onto our desired route a little to the west of home. As we're passing the Capitol building, we called our roommates to tell them about the traffic. Our plan, and not to hold dinner. We noticed the time as 6:45 p.m.-ish. As 85 and 75 came together, traffic opened up again, and we were on our way. Small issue about, after 10 minutes, I looked out the window and noticed some pretty serious-looking swamps. I was new to Atlanta, and the sight surprised me. I pointed this out to my roommate, remarking how I didn't realize Atlanta had swamps. I will never forget her response. "What the are you talking about? Atlanta doesn't have swamps." My roommate looks out my side and notices the swamps, before noticing an exit sign for a town I'd never heard of. She swore, pulled off at the next exit, and got back on going south. I asked her what was wrong. She said we'd missed 285 somehow and ended up almost at the Tennessee border. She had me call our roommates again. The call log would show only 15 minutes had passed. It would take us 2.5 hours off flooring to get back to 285. Not even the full distance we'd driven in an impossibly short time. Could not explain to this day. This happened several years ago now, and I will need to say background information first, so the story makes sense. Me, my brother, and a friend were playing a game of 40-40, kind of like hide and seek, on the friend's property, which was large, with this gigantic garden or land bit that was probably a couple 100 yards long, with some segmented areas that you can't see from the top of the property because of the trees and hedges. It was nighttime, so the seeker had a torch, and the other two hiders could hide in the darkness. And to give the seeker a chance at winning every few minutes, the hiders had to shout out into the darkness to give a hint to the seeker about where they were hiding since the property was so big. This will be important later. I was the seeker, so my brother and my friend were hiding together and moving about the property to stay away from me and my torchlight. At the time, I had been looking for them for a few minutes and was at the very bottom of the property, with a log pile behind me and a shed on the edge of a forest in front of me. I heard a noise behind me and turned to shine my torch at the woodpile, momentarily seeing what looked like the glint of eyes by the logs. It could have been an animal, but it still freaked me out. Then after about 10 seconds, I suddenly heard a second quick rustle from behind the shed by the tree line that was now about 10 feet away from me. I started walking toward the shed, and then I heard someone whisper my name from behind the shed. It sounded exactly like my brother's voice. It was an exact copy of his voice whispering my name. I started walking toward the tree line or shed to where it was coming from, expecting to find my brother hiding there, when suddenly I heard my brother and my friend shouting out from the other end of the property, playing by the rules of the game. I very quickly put two and two together and started running and screaming in that direction. I heard their faint shouting, trying to get away from whatever had whispered my name. Still to this day, I can't work out who or what was seemingly trying to lure me into the tree line, especially the fact that whatever it was knew my name and sounded exactly like my brother. It still gives me chills thinking about it, and what could have happened if the other guys hadn't made me turn and run the other way.